sketches at the weekend, and now there's nothing left but another week to end.
Welcome to 7 in 7, a veritable whistle-stop tour of 7 of London's most marvellous things, namely its bridges. For over 1700 years there was only one bridge in London, and then they decided to build a second one, this Westminster Bridge, London's second bridge across the river. You wouldn't know it to look at it today, but this is exactly the same bridge that Cillian Murphy stumbled across in 28 days later, wearing nothing but a surgical nightie. All this lot weren't here. So a little known fact about Westminster Bridge is when the sun shines at a certain point in the sky, it creates cocks on the ground. Okay, we're one bridge down, 6 bridges to go, time's ticking, we better get cooking. Like lots of London's South Bank, Waterloo Bridge is just a big solid concrete mass. Concrete, not the prettiest, but when you dig beneath the surface, there's blooming marvellous history lurking beneath. Let's take a look. It was built in 1817, originally called the Strand Bridge, but they changed the name to commemorate the Battle of Waterloo. It's 1,200 feet long and 80 feet wide, and although not London's prettiest bridge, it's certainly got some of London's prettiest views. Thanks to the bend in the river, you can see everything that matters in London here from Waterloo Bridge. I mean, look at that. So Waterloo Bridge was the only Thames crossing to be damaged in World War II, and because there were no men around at the time to rebuild it, it was nicknamed the Ladies' Bridge. In 1978, Georgy Markov, a Bulgarian dissident, was walking across this bridge when all of a sudden a man jabbed him in the leg with an umbrella. The man said sorry and Markov thought nothing of it, but 3 days later he was lying dead, killed by KGB poison. Okay, so that's 2 bridges down, 5 to go. Blackfriars next. Over! Here we are, bridge number 3, Blackfriars Bridge. Built in 1769, it was originally known as William Pitt Bridge, and it was opened after a competition in which 69 engineers applied for funding to build it. Blackfriars Bridge came to international renown in 1982 when the Italian banker Roberto Calvi was found hanging dead from its rafters. Rumour has it, Calvi was a member of an illegal sect called the Blackfriars, the Fratineri, the Black Brothers. They killed him on Blackfriars Bridge because of the name, the association, or so the conspiracy theory goes. The truth is, we'll never know. Here we are, bridge number 4, the Millennium Bridge. Over 1,200 feet long and just 13 feet wide, it was built by the architect Norman Foster in 2001 to resemble a blade of light. The Millennium Bridge is most famous for something called lateral synchronous excitation, which basically means wobble to you and I. When it first opened, it swayed from side to side in a nausea-inducing swing. Sadly, that's no longer the case. After a campaign by the Evening Standard to keep the swing, the engineers decided it wasn't safe and they fitted dampeners, just like a car suspension system. Wobbly. Okay, so we're struggling with Millennium Wind again here, but I can tell you that this bridge cost £18.2 million to make. That's 2.2 million over budget. Sounds familiar? So it's not just Waterloo Bridge that's had a Hollywood star turn. The Millennium Bridge, of course, was a starring piece in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, in which the Death Eaters flew in and destroyed the bridge. If you look over my shoulder, you can just see the Holy Grail, Journey's End, Tower Bridge. We'll be there in just 3 bridges' time. Game on. Here we are, bridge number 5, Southwark Bridge. Built in 1814, it's 800 feet long and 55 feet wide, and when it was first created had the longest iron span in history at 240 feet. So probably the most interesting thing about Southwark Bridge is the fact that it has stairs on both sides. British stag-do parties seem to love to dare each other to swim from this side of the bridge to that side of the bridge. Pure madness. So here I am on Southwark Bridge. You've got to feel a little bit sorry for Southwark Bridge. When it was first created, it was a total financial disaster for the toll keepers. No one used it. In fact, to this day, it still has a reputation as London's least used bridge. So much so, its nickname is the car park bridge, because all people do is park their cars on it. Anyway, that's it for Southwark. Up next, London Bridge! The oldest bridge in London, well, the oldest site in London. This is a new one, but when it was originally built in 50 AD, it was the sole crossing, the only one across the Thames. I mean, where do you start with London Bridge? It's just got so much history. In medieval times, there would have been houses crammed along the whole thing, busy shops. It had a real tradition for putting people's heads on spikes. William Wallace had his head up here, Thomas Cromwell had his head up here, Thomas More had his head up here. was incredibly grisly. It was a horrible place, really. This, as you can see, is a new bridge. It's not the old one of yore. One thing that excites me is we're now in sighting distance as the sun goes down of our goal, the end, Tower Bridge. One of my favourite stories about London Bridge is how the American entrepreneur Robert McCulloch bought London Bridge thinking he was getting Tower Bridge for £2.8 million. It's now set up in Arizona. Final destination is in sight, Tower Bridge, possibly the most ambitious civil engineering project ever undertaken. 400 men, 40,000 tonnes of solid granite. This thing is a beast. In 1968, Lieutenant Alan Pollock was so unimpressed with the fact that the RAF were not going to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of the service that he decided to fly through the gap in Tower Bridge without actually telling anyone. It was a magnificent sight, but unfortunately Alan got fired. One of my favourite stories about Tower Bridge was how in 1952 a number 78 bus got stuck on the middle as the bridge began to rise. In a last desperate attempt, the driver slammed on the acceleration and managed to jump 3 feet across a gap. Completed in 1894, the government had 3 conditions when Tower Bridge was built. 1, it looked like the Tower of London. 2, tall ships could pass through it. And 3, it had a cannon on the top. The only real way to be north and south of the river at the same time. Whew, so that's it, the end. 7 in 7 is done. I hope you've learned something, whether it's heads on spikes, swinging Italian bankers, or penis shadows. This is the Queen's Walk.